Today, we are building a tier list ranking some of the most played decks in the Trump format. The Tierlaments, Rescue Ace, Unchained, Mannadium, Purrely format. These are the 5 pillars. They do hold a very significant spot and they set the bar pretty high. Now, there's no more YCS to go to or any sort of big events, but we still got regionals and we still got OTS Store championships. So if you're there to try to snipe the invite, maybe this is going to help you map it out. Mostly this is based off of my own experience and opinion. So if you don't agree with this, you can leave it down in the comments section. I know some of you guys are really just here to check how much I respect your deck. Fair enough. I mean, if I don't really respect it, it's not going to tier very high, I assume. So anyways, let's go. Okay, to kick things off, we have one of the pillar decks, Sinful Spoil, Rescue Ace. Not much needs to be said there. Resolving Turbulence is significant advantage. Also, significant disruption comes from Hydra into 2 traps. But one of the best qualities of this deck is the consistency, the amount of summons that it can output and play through so many hand traps and even dodge stuff like Imperm. There's just so much going for this deck, and once you commit like 1 card to stopping your opponent, but then they can still resolve Turbulence, you know that feeling makes your heart sink. It feels so bad that you still have to grind through that back row, and they're just building advantage on your turn. It can even successfully play on your own turn through Impulse, and if you don't have the proper triple attack, you're gonna have a pretty difficult time. And you know, SP in this deck in particular is even more annoying, and they can even establish, of course, Baron or Borderload Savage. It has everything in the kit. So yeah, tier 1 for sure. Then we have ABC. I'm gonna give it into the Rogue tier. I want to put it higher. It can build significant boards. Anything in tier 3 can take an entire tournament, especially at the local level, even at the regional level. But what I would say is that they have significant weaknesses going into the format, such as being so hand trap heavy. It's difficult to play. I don't think you're going to get hit by Imperm as much because most of your stuff activates as spell equips that come out, and then you can build your negation from there. The biggest issue is when you get hit by stuff like Droll. It's complete shutout. If you get hit by stuff that disrupt your combo line, then it hurts a lot. But it can still build like, start with Crystal Wing. You start with Crystal Wing, get into Regulus, get into Barrelload Savage, or Baron, one of those things, one of the negations, you're fine. Tierlaments, one of the pillar decks. This is one of the reasons why we need so many hand traps, because it's layered disruption when it comes to Crime in the back, Sulliek in the back, and then the monsters in the front. Baron's also in the front. What are you going to do? You need some way to break the board, but it's not that easy. They successfully resolve multiple mills, leaving Grave Disruption from the Shufflers, Front Row Disruption from Baron, and all the other monsters. You can go into an easy fusion, then you can make Kaleido Heart. Kaleido Heart just shuffles some of the stuff back. It's really strong. Next, Branded Chimera. I want to place this higher because I like playing this deck. I want to put it here, but it really deserves a tier 2 spot. I mean, this deck is a 1-card combo deck. It's significantly strong. The deck is slowly seeing more play because, of course, we also have future potential with the Candleman. Candleman, I think, is one of the best cards coming into this deck. You can search it out. People need to know how to pivot from just relying on the Chimera Fusion stuff into using the actual illusion cards, namely Master Tau. If you know how to use Master Tau, you're going to have a much more fun time with this deck. Don't be playing a cookie cutter play. Don't be doing combo lines that are just more or less combo, just demos or whatever. I think you can just find ways to kind of be fluid with the deck, and that's why you should play multiple lines of things that can bait Ash. It's really important that you can stop the Ash or waste it so that your 1-card combos can go through, and that's really important. And also know how to play your Super Poly with Fallen Albaz. Next, Unchained, a tier 1 deck. This is the most fair tier 1 deck out there. There's no one card that is like a significant blowout if it resolves. Well, maybe except for like Lord Yama or I guess Shavara, but like honestly, this is the most fair one. It's not like Turbulence where it sets 4 and now your opponent has to eat a 3,000 attack and defense monster plus a bunch of back row. This one is everything lines up so perfectly and floats so well so that it really depends on the skill of the player knowing which one to activate, leading them down multiple lines. It's one of the most branchy decks out there, and that's why I like this deck. It's also up there among the best. Then there's Drytron. I heard that this one also recently topped a regional. And even through all that, I'm still gonna put it at tier 3 just because it's so easy to counter, because there's so many things in the format that counters it. If you're gonna be using your Diviner or your Mu Beta, it's gonna get hit by the Imperm and whatnot. And if you're trying to use anything else, I get it. You get hit by a Droll, your Ben 10, your turn is more or less skipped. So this one still has that significant weakness, but if you can bypass it, somehow force the summon. I think there was an Amor Factor Pain in their deck just so that they can skip the opponent's turn back. Makes a lot of sense. This deck has some of the best graveyard recovery, and I would know. during that format. Like the Drytron format, I played it and I really enjoyed it. And then there is Horus Bestial. This is a tier 2 deck. I think it's even above the branded Chimera. It's so strong, especially with the Resonator engine. Being able to generate free synchros, free rank 8s, it's one of the best decks in the format for sure. And even in YCS results, it's definitely shown. Then there's Tearlament Horus. I would say it's slightly weaker than the regular Tearlaments because the Horus cards, they don't generate much. You'd rather have them milled into the graveyard. Or maybe you want to start with MST.TV. It's a little bit harder to play and the consistency is just a little bit lower, which is why the more pure version is a little bit more advantageous. Then there's Sunseed, low side, which is Rikus and Avalon. It's a tier 2 deck. I think I would speak for most people in NA. They don't know what this deck does. They don't understand it. Most people don't play it, which is why we don't really see any results here. But I guess in EU, this is definitely a very scary deck, especially in the right hands. Then there's Branded Despia. I'm going to rate this a little bit lower than Branded Chimera. This one is just easy to play around. It's a little bit more linear, and because of how long it's existed in the format, even Master Duel players know how to counter this deck, which is why it's a little bit of a lower tier 2. Albazoa, Ritual Dogmatika. It's a Copium deck. I let this deck resolve the effect multiple times. I basically emptied out my entire extra deck and still won, which goes to say, hey, if I have main deck outs against your deck, and many of these decks do, you're not gonna have that great of a time. I mean, it's cool that you get the advantage of ripping apart the opponent's extra deck, but it really only shines in that particular scenario. Learning how to play against some of the decks that can play in the main deck. If you try to play against Floowandereeze, it's just like such an awkward matchup, you know what I'm saying? And then we have Infernoble, tier 1.5. It's a very strong Synchro Link based deck. I think Isolde is just such a powerful card. It's like the remnants of some of the old days, like Hulk and stuff like that. One of the monsters that is representing the old school spirits of Link 2. Not to mention that the field spell is ridiculously powerful, not being hard once per turn, being able to generate significant advantage and equip spells. It's really good. And I've thrown hand trap after hand trap against this deck. I need something like Draw and Lockboard to really stun this one out. Otherwise, it's a really rough time. And sometimes you just need to use a Floodgate because it's really hard to play against them, especially when they go first. It feels a little bit die rolly. I think I actually can deserve tier 1 because you can play around hand traps really well too. I'll put it at tier 1. Next, we have Dragon Link. This is a tier 1.5 for sure. Very strong deck. Dragon Link will never die as long as there's good dragons around. Like, most dragon support is just so generic that as long as they have the rocket package, I don't think they're ever gonna see a time where they're gonna be bad. I mean, now it's like Bestial Dragon Link, to be honest. Heroes, I'm sorry, you guys are going down to tier 3. Super Polys in the format, making it very difficult to play. I guess that's kind of why, like, the Dragon Link is down here, is because of Super Poly being able to rip your deck to shreds. Earth Machines, I think it's a Copium deck. I've seen you guys like do such a big fancy play only and on a very linear board that people can just more or less read. If you're good, you can read the board and you're not gonna have a tough time. Next, we have Mannadium. It's very good. It does suffer from really one weakness, which is Super Poly and getting disrupted. Going second is really hard with this deck. Someone gave me the advice of just throw everything at them really early, and then they're gonna find themselves struggling to have the resource to build their board, because most of the stuff recur. So if you stop them from getting it early, that means they have to hard open it. But this isn't exactly a deck that maintains resources in the hand. Yeah, tier 1.5, although it is one of the namesake deck. It is the M part of the Trump format. Then we have Pure Centurion. This is not the other Centurion deck. I have another Centurion deck somewhere here, but I think if you want to play Pure, it's too easy to break. Like, even the Horus Centurion takes a higher spot, but this one is very linear. Although this is the one deck that is shifting how we put our side pattern, because we don't want to get lost and killed by a Hot Red Dragon King Calamity. I mean, that play is still existing there, but without the other cards layering it, the amount of hand traps you throw in a more pure build, you might get destroyed because they can dedicate all that resources in stopping that one key play. Labyrinth, I think it's tier 2-esque, somewhere there. I haven't really seen anyone do anything too crazy these days with it. I think it's just because the deck variance is just too high now. If it's a little bit lower, then the traps can be a bit more focused, but for now, I'm going to put it at tier 2. Then there is... this is Horus with the Resonator engine. It's kind of at the lower end of tier 2. I think with the Bestials, it's much stronger. This one has the Resonator engine. The other one also has the Resonator engine. I mean, this is a once per turn, get yourself a Synchro 8 or a... sorry, not Synchro 8. Synchro 10 or rank 8. Still strong. Sword Soul. It's kind of low. It's very easy to play, and then especially when people main deck Nib now. I think the stronger end board for this deck has always been using what is it? The Sinister Longyuan, and therefore it's hard to end on that board, especially when people are just dropping Nibs left and right. Purrely, another namesake, one of the pillars. It's 1.5. I think it's significantly dropped since Rescue Ace's appearance in the top tier. Also, it's a victim of Master Duel, I would say. Anytime I see some deck become top tier in Master Duel, and whenever it gets represented back in real life, people know how to counter because they see it so often. I mean, I get that not everyone plays Master Duel, sure, but I would have to say that Master Duel more or less kind of made most of their effects easy to remember. One of the hardest things about Purrely back in the day is like there's so many effects on all these cards that some people can't keep up with it. But now that it's kind of been a little bit overplayed, it definitely dropped. And also getting hit with an Extinguish on your regular Purrely, that one sucks. And getting hit on the what's his name? Contain on the Purrely also is awful, and those two things resolving perfectly results in a turn skip. So they have to be very careful with the happy memory keeping your cards alive. Stun Cash Tira, that's a tier 3s deck. I mean, you're just relying on banish base plays, D shifters, Macrocosmos D, and D Fissure. These are the cards, and this is one of the more fragile ones. So if you have a board wipe, they more or less just eat that play. I would like to see them play some Solemn Judgment, something like that, to just hold the board. But more or less, it deserves there. Next, we have Marine Cess. I think it's like, I don't know where to put this. It's like a Rogue-S deck right now because no one's really playing it. And I think it's still in this category. You're not seeing it very often. Anyone that's playing Mathmech is lying to themselves. It's good. I mean, people are focusing on searching it. But again, when your main search is down to one copy, people just focus on just throwing a Droll on you, and Droll being in the main doesn't help this case either. When you lose consistency in your deck and every single search option gets kind of cut off, then yeah, that's not very good. Then there's Runic for higher Sprite. It's up there. It's somewhere around here. It's a really annoying deck, and it doesn't play by your rules. All right, it's drawing cards. It's there to just make sure that you can't play, and then suddenly you're gonna die. Dinosaurs, you don't have anything significant to offer. Lars is very strong, I get it, but your battle phase is some of the weakest I've seen. So I'm leaving it there. If there's disruption in the battle phase, then the game's like 90% going to end your turn. This is Fire King Sinful Spoil. I'm going to put this in tier 2. I've been playing this deck a lot recently. I love this deck. I love the way that it plays. It plays almost like Adamancipator. Like you have Kawakimeru Guardians to negate monster effects. So in terms of dealing with hand trap, you have a Varta, or the elephant, the pink elephant. It's there to stun out some of those problems. You can summon it first as your normal summon because you have one free normal summon more or less in the deck because most of the other summons are special summons. You can go through pretty hard lines. You can play during your turn. You can almost make it feel like Tierlaments where you're blowing up your opponent's board along the way thanks to Kieran. This deck is going to have significant impact, especially during the weekend on release. But afterwards, we're going to see how it's going to take shape. And OCG is definitely like one of the better ones. I'm going to give it a little bit more respect there. All right, Fluanderies, man, I just love getting hit by the Harpies Feather Storm, especially when they flip a QCR version. You know they're dedicated to not letting you play. They're so good at the game that they can always skip your turn thanks to that one trap card. And for good reason. I mean, they also play cards like Triple Tactics Thrust to dig the card out, set it onto the field. You know you're going to have a rough time throwing a hand trap onto them. And so they can try to earn their turn back. And that's one of the tug-of-war plays within this matchup. If you don't know how to deal with it, you accidentally run into a Triple Tactics Thrust. It feels really bad, okay? Then there is the Vanquish Soul. Very strong deck, has made multiple top showings already. Thanks to Jiaolong making the deck more consistent, the Cash Tier line automatically opens up Stake Your Soul, and that leads to a full search board. They're going to maintain significant advantage. This is one of the more difficult decks to play during the main phase because they have probably the timing advantage over you in almost all cases. So understanding your timing in these, I guess, draw phase, standby phase is, one of the most important parts. Next, we have our favorite Horus deck, Horus Centurion. Centurion, this one definitely much more layered compared to its pure counterpart, making it harder to hit. And this one has a more successful rate landing that hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity. And so I don't know where to put this one. It's around the middle of tier 2. I wouldn't put it at 1.5. It's not that hard to block. There's a lot of triggers that can completely ruin this particular state. Even like Branded Chimera, summoning out a Gazelle can ruin the entire line. It is what it is. And the back row is just very predictable because you usually clog 2 of them with your own Centurion monsters. It is where it is. Then there is Exosister. I don't know where to put this. I haven't seen many people play. I've only seen it in action once, and I don't think it was carried by the right player. I'll put it in tier 3. I think it has a good chance as well. There's so many cards that do banish out of the graveyard. I mean, if you see a Turbulence on, like, that's going to be summoned at some point, you can just preemptively just activate your Vadis blocking that particular line so that if they do go into it, you can get significant advantage through your Exosister monsters being Exceed summoned thanks to your opponent banishing cards. Not to mention you can kind of force it out yourself. I think it's still pretty strong. There's just a lot of banishing available in the format. But I think VW, Virtual World, I think I saw a recent top 8 with this, so I'm just going to give it the respect right now. It's probably in high tier 3. Either that or because people don't expect this deck, so you can get the advantage. I mean, a lot of decks, when people don't expect it, then you can really climb up. I mean, like ABC, if people don't expect it, then you're going to do really well. But when people realize what you're playing, then you're going to have a much tougher time. But for like the tier 1s, people can expect it and still die. That's one of the clear differences here. Salamangreat, a very strong deck. I will put it at the very bottom of tier 2. It's got the counter trap, it's got the blowout, it's got the blow ups, and it has the strong OTK access code. It can go into Decode, Talk, or Heat Soul for drawing, so you can load up with significant hand trap. Unfortunately, it's a hand trap heavy format, so you can get blown out by a Nibiru just dropping on your board. That part still sucks, then it's still there. The hot red deck, well, it's a structure deck. It's decent. But in comparison with everything else, I think that you're just coping if you think you can win an event with it purely with its own engine. I think the Vision Resonator stuff is still really good though, and I think you can still pair this. You can definitely pair this. You know what? I'll put it at the bottom of tier 3. I think you can still pair it with just with Bestials to make and break the deck. I think you can definitely push it in that angle. And Pure Sprite. I haven't seen anyone really play this. I don't know why I added this to the list, but it's here. I think Pure Sprite. Is it that easy to break? I can't quite remember. I mean, you got your double negate. You have your trap card to absorb. Do you have a negation anymore? I mean, I guess you can still technically make Toad with Reprodocus if we're still going back in like last format. I'll put it here. I think it's got potential. And that's it for this tier list. I think most decks are in the correct space, but if you think I didn't give your deck enough respect, well, leave it down in the comment section. But you better be ready to provide proof. I need proof on this, otherwise I think you're just blowing hot air. You feel offended that your deck isn't higher. But you just have to accept the fact that, you know, it's based off of performance, and not just your performance, but also significant weaknesses in the format. It's just true, but there's no YCS, so, you know, you can talk all you want. And I guess aside from that, there's also an upcoming counter video, which is going to be, we're just going to destroy the Fire King deck before it even comes out. We're just going to expose all its weaknesses. So if you're planning on playing the Fire King deck, well, just be prepared that everyone's going to know how to counter you, and that's going to be in the how to beat video. I'm going to explain all the timings, all the weaknesses, and all the significant cards you should stop, just so that your board ends, well, really weak. And that's thanks to, you know, I guess spending hours and hours on the deck and letting people beat me as well. So you get to learn a lot just from losing. That's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Hit the thumbs up and hit subscribe, ding that notification bell. And I will see you all in the next one.